Lucamus Prime here, so it's time for the next episode of my series Old is Better Than New. And in today's video, I'm going to be covering this time an example of an action movie franchise where personally I think that old is better than new in this franchise. This is a franchise which actually contains my favourite action movie of all time. And this franchise, where I personally think the old is better than new, is none other than, of course, the franchise of Terminator. So, you guys are all probably going to be asking me, of course, what does Terminator mean to me as a franchise? Well, when it comes to what I love about a franchise, I absolutely love the first two movies. The first movie, which I, of course, have here as a Blu-ray Steelbook, to me is an absolute masterpiece. Definitely a phenomenal start to the franchise. Out of the films of this franchise, this one is considered to be a horror movie, in a way, really, because it is pretty scary and pretty dark, I must say. But then after that, the franchise then began to add in lots more action, with, of course, the first of the sequels, which is this. And this film right here, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, is hands down my favourite action movie of all time. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. In my opinion, one of the best films ever made. To me, it's the greatest action movie ever made. And what I will say is, even though I recently lost respect for James Cameron, I would definitely consider this to be his best movie, in my opinion. And I also definitely consider this film to be the end of the Terminator franchise. And I'm mainly talking about, of course, the film's director's cut, which has an alternate ending, where it shows a future which gives the main character Sarah Connor and her son John a very happy ending. So, I like to, of course, pretend that this film was the end of the franchise. And when it comes to why I think these two films are much better than what we're getting today, I personally think, of course, they have absolutely amazing characters. I've already mentioned, of course, Sarah Connor. She is definitely one of my favourite female characters in cinematic history. Just how you write a character so well, in my opinion, because her development starts off really well, where she starts as being a waitress in a restaurant, who, of course, is hunted by a Terminator to kill her before she can give birth to her son, John, who is destined to be the leader of the human resistance in the future. But then after, of course, an encounter, and with help, of course, from Carl Reese, who travels back in time to protect her, she, of course, then starts training to prepare for machines to return. And of course, that happens in Terminator 2. And in T2, oh, she's an absolute badass in that movie. And yeah, absolutely love Sarah Connor. And also as well, I think the films have a really amazing story as well, in my opinion, too. And I must say as well, phenomenal action and special effects. Because when I rewatch these films, I definitely think they've aged really well to the standards of this year, in my opinion. Or personally, I think when it comes to visual effects, I think it's true we live in an era where old films tend to have much better visual effects than what we're getting today, in my opinion. And when it comes, of course, to what came after Terminator 2, we, of course, got a third installment, which is, of course, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. Now, when it comes to the theatrical versions of the films after Terminator 2, I'd say there's probably the most okay out of them, really, to be honest, But my qualities I do have with it is that I do feel it is kind of a bit of a rehash of Terminator 2 in many areas, really. And I do also as well feel it does make the end of T2 pointless, because T2, of course, the main characters stop Judgment Day. So I like to, of course, consider that to be the end of the franchise for that reason, because Judgment Day has been stopped. But then, of course, for Terminator, in Terminator 3 reveals it was only postponed, because apparently Judgment Day is inevitable. So that definitely was disappointing, in my opinion, how it did that, really. So it made the whole event of Terminator 2 pointless, in my opinion. I didn't really like that. Then when it comes to what came after, we then, of course, got in 2009, what is actually my third favourite of the franchise, but I'm talking only about the Director's Cut, which is, of course, Terminator Salvation. The Director's Cut, in my opinion, is the true version of it, because I love how, for one thing, it, of course, goes back to an R rating, which makes perfect sense for a Terminator franchise, because, come on, the franchise isn't for kids, is it? Absolutely not. So I like how it went to a higher rating in its Director's Cut. And I consider this to be a prequel to the first movie, not a sequel to T2, because I of course, pretend nothing came after T2. I pretend that this is actually a prequel to the first movie, setting it up, really, with the whole idea of Carl Reese going back in time to protect Sarah. So I personally think Director's Cut's a true version, but the theatrical version, in my opinion, is very disappointing, and definitely, in my opinion, very, very weak. Which is why I personally think that the first two films can't be topped when it comes to my opinion on Terminator. And I was hoping after Salvation we'd get a continuation film setting up the first film, where, of course, it involves Carl Reese going back in time using the time travel technology. But, unfortunately, of course, 6 years later in 2015, we got the absolute garbage film, of course, which is, as I nickname it, franchise Terminator Genesis, or as actually known as Terminator Genesis, which, in my opinion, is absolute trash. And if you want to hear me rant about them, then please go check out my trash talk of it, because I think it's a terrible movie. I've always hated it since I first saw it. Just absolutely horrendous, in my opinion. Like, it's just a terrible film. It has no idea what it wants to be. It feels like it's trying to be like a remake, really, of a franchise. The only thing is it has Arnie coming back, of course. What I will say is that Arnie will always be a Terminator, and in these films, which he's in as a Terminator, he's never, in my opinion, a bad quality, because he always does a great job playing a Terminator in all the films he's in, even though he does a pretty bad direction delivery in something which I'm ranting about, of course. But I still think he does a great job. But when it comes to Genesis, I think it's absolute trash. And in my opinion, it ruins, of course, the whole idea of going back in time to protect Sarah, because it just doesn't make any sense, in my opinion. Like, the writing in this film is just so questionable. Whereas I think in the first two films, the writing was, in my opinion, much better and very well done, in my opinion. Whereas in this, it's just very confusing, in my opinion. It has no idea what it wants to be. And of course, it ends on a dumb sequel setup, saying what appears to be a new trilogy. But, of course, we never got that trilogy, did we? Because this film didn't do well. Oh, did it? Because of the commercial performance. So, yeah, why am I not surprised? Then, however, despite this, we unfortunately got another Terminator film 4 years later. Oh my god. Like, I just had no idea when we were going to end this franchise back then. I had no idea. Because we, of course, got 2019's Terminator Dark Fate. Or as I would probably nickname it, something like maybe Terminator Crap Fate, or Terminator Dark Woke, or Terminator Woke Fate. Because this film was definitely proof that the franchise was going woke, and there was no coming back for it at all. Because this film completely, shall we say, terminated my interest in wanting to watch more films of the franchise. When I first saw it at the cinema, I used to like bits of it, really, to be honest. I don't know why I did now, because I really regret liking parts of it. But one thing I've always hated about it ever since I first saw it was that the opening scene gives the absolutely horrendous alien-free cliche to John Connor. And it makes the first two films' efforts to save his life completely and utterly pointless, and I absolutely despise that. Like, that, in my opinion, was terrible, and the way they executed it, in my opinion, was pretty bad as well. And he gets replaced by very unlikable characters who are poorly written, in my opinion, and they're just so annoying and underdeveloped. I couldn't stand them in this film. Especially, of course, the new protagonist, Danny Ramos, who just really got on my nerves, especially when I rewatch a film. She annoyed me a lot more and more as I rewatched it. So, Dark Fate, in my opinion, was the nail in the coffin when it comes to me wanting to watch more films. I'm like, no, I can't do this anymore. This franchise is, shall I say, terminated. Because it's also, once again, ends on a stupid sequel setup again. But thankfully, we're never going to get those sequels, because this film also performed badly too. Well, we're not surprised. So, and when it comes to if you even do any more films, I would not be watching them. There has been talks of like a potential reboot, but I am not interested whatsoever. Especially because James Cameron's involved in them, and because I lost respect for him, I no longer trust him to do good films. Then again, though, I don't even know when he's actually going to release them, because it seems all the cares he is making was Avatar cash grabs, doesn't he? So yeah, there's that really. But I personally no longer care for his franchise, and it seems even Arnie doesn't care either, because he said he's not going to return because he thinks the last films were poorly written. And I couldn't agree more with him on that statement, because I think these films are suffering from really bad writing. It's really appalling, in my opinion, how, like, these two masterpieces here are so much better written than what we're getting today when it comes to Terminator. It's just really appalling, in my opinion. Better stories, better characters, better writing, in my opinion. And stuff that actually makes sense and is actually enjoyable to watch as well, I must say. Whereas nowadays with Terminator, no, I can't stand what this franchise has become. It went from, in my opinion, one of the best franchises of all time to garbage, in my opinion. And that's why I'm not going to watch any more films of a franchise. When it comes to, of course, what I own, I, of course, have the first two films as Blu-ray Steelbooks, of course. So there's the first movie. And then, of course, the sequel, which is my favourite, in my opinion, the best action movie ever made. I do also as well own Terminator 3 and Salvation on Blu-ray as well. And if you're wondering why I own them, let's just say they're much more tolerable, in my opinion, of what came after them. That's why I have them. And I, of course, always have a Dreadless Court of Salvation on Blu-ray, because that, to me, is the true version of the film, which I regard as a prequel to a first movie. Not a sequel to 3, but a prequel to a first movie, in my opinion. That's how I picture Salvation. But as far as I'm concerned, Terminator, for me, is a massive example of a franchise where the old is better than the new. And I like to pretend that it was one of the 2 films, with Salvation and Dreadless Court a prequel, and that's what it is for me, really. So, what I'll do is I'll only watch the good films, screw the bad ones, screw all of them, and I'm not going to watch any more franchise. This franchise, as far as I'm concerned, is terminated. So guys, this is me doing the next episode of Old is Better Than New, where I talk about why, in my opinion, Terminator is a massive example of a sci-fi action franchise where, in my opinion, Old is better than new. So, you know the drill, guys. Be sure to give this video a like. Also, be sure to put in the comments what you guys think of Terminator. Do you think Old is better than new in that franchise? I don't know what you think in the comments below. Also, be sure to join the team by pressing subscribe, who's coming in the future. And hasta la vista, baby.